Welcome to the Wednesday class that shall not be named. I'm going to say it one more time. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Wednesday class that shall not be named. I can never figure out when we actually officially go on YouTube and when we're still buffering. We're thrilled to be here. It is now back to normal weather-wise in Savannah. It's going to be in the high 60s, and I think in Bluffton it'll be similar. And it's been a wonderful, interesting week. As we had snow last week, we still have a lot of ice on our front yard, I guess, because
my recycle bin anymore.
So welcome everybody who is
How they
here.
got throw it in the garbage.
Welcome to Ron and Arlene and Flossie and Dave and Karen and Stuart and Eva and Lou. Hopefully, Lou, you're doing well. Hope you're safe and sound. I think we have people now representing are in 3 different states in 2 different countries. So doing great. We got Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, and we've got Britain, Great Britain, or England.
So, Rabbi, did you ever think you would be worldwide?
No, I did not. Thank you, COVID, I guess, because COVID has brought us all to Zoom and YouTube. Our YouTube, yeah, we do everything online now. But we do YouTube, we do Zoom, we do Instagram, Facebook, of course, emails. We do everything now. So it's a very interesting transition. We were late to the game, but when we had to make the choice, we went in full blown. So we are going to continue our study of the Bible today, although it's going to be a little bit of a different perspective, because whereas we looked at some of the biblical books, we're going to be looking at a particular character today, and whether this character is in the Bible or not is not up for debate. She is, however, very briefly, and what we're going to learn about this character comes much later in some ways, but also is very ancient. So we're going to talk about, of course, Lilith, and that was requested by Flossie. We're going to be doing the Hebrew Bible, different aspects of it, so that was great because that fits right in, because it has some connection to the Bible, but goes far beyond it. And so we'll look at Lilith as a character. First off, we have to understand Lilith is not mentioned in the creation story. She is a very famous character in Jewish history, in Jewish literature, in the Talmud, and other places. She is there. However, she is not really a major biblical character at all. In fact, there's only one reference to Lilith in the entire Bible, and it comes in Isaiah 34:14, which says, "The wild cat shall meet with the jackals, and the satyr shall cry to his fellow. Yea, Lilith shall repose there and find her a place of rest." That's the only time we see Lilith in the Bible. And in no way does it connect to the character of Lilith in the way we think possibly. So let's look at Lilith. But first, look at where we develop the idea of Lilith. Like, where does she come from in terms of our history? So let's look at who Lilith is first. So before we look at Lilith, we're going to have to look at the creation story. And that's essential to our understanding of Lilith, and in a way you'll see. So if we look at the creation story, does everybody see it? And we're going to, right here, we're right.
Yes.
All right. And God created human beings or man in God's own image. Sometimes you get better translations. In the image of God, in the image of God created him, male and female, he created them. And God blessed them, and God said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply." All right, so this is the first reference to human beings. As you can see, it's a very strange passage. We can spend a lot of time on this passage. We're not going to spend as much time now because we're really centering more on Lilith. But we have here, God created him, male and female, he created them. This created him male and female and created them is a very debated phrase, but this is where you get the first. So that's done. We've got men and women are created here. Chapter 1 of Genesis, all done, very simple. However, it's not that simple, because if we go to chapter 2, it changes, because we go now to verse 18. And God said, "It is not good that man should be alone. I will make him a helper," or make him somebody to be with him. "And out of the ground the Lord formed every beast." It didn't work. And then God changed God's plan and did this. And God caused a deep sleep. He took one of his ribs and closed up the place of the flesh. And the rib which God had taken from the man, he made woman. And said, "This is now bone of my bones, flesh of my flesh, and she be called woman." She is called woman. She was taken out of man. "Therefore man shall cleave to father and mother, cleave to his wife, and they will be one flesh." So this is what we find, two different descriptions of the creation of man and woman. And that is essential for the understanding of Lilith, because they are different in several ways. In the first story, God creates some sort of being that may be androgynous or have both male and female parts, or God created man and woman at the same time. And in chapter 2, God creates man first, takes a rib, and then creates woman. So they're conflicting stories. So some would say, obviously, it's just two different versions of the story. It's not meant to be taken literally. Others say it is, different versions from different places. But when it comes to Lilith, this is where she is born officially. To some, she is the woman from chapter 1, whereas the woman in chapter 2 is Eve. So Lilith would thus be the first woman or the first bride, and Eve would be the second and the progenitor of Judaism. So this is a very interesting thing, because it is not there at all. There is no reference to Lilith, nothing at all. What we're going to speak about Lilith has nothing to do in any way, but she becomes a very major character in Jewish literature and Jewish history. So who is this Lilith character we're talking about? And let's look at what we see. So when we look at her, we also have to look at what's going on in the rest of the world, because we have writings, we have tablets, we have bowls with depictions of various things on them, and we're going to see that the origins of Lilith is pretty easy to at least find at least some idea of the origins. So Lilith is actually probably connected to spirits that are found in the story of Gilgamesh, which is one of the oldest stories in the world. It's a Babylonian story about the creation of the world. And there are two demons in this story, Lilu and Lili-Tu. One is a man and one is a woman. They are harmful spirits. And this may be the origin of Lilith. This demon, or this male and female demon from the Babylonian history. We're talking much older than Judaism, or 19th century. Although if you believe in Abraham, Abraham would have been born in this area where the idea of Lilu and Lilu 2 are created, because Abraham comes from Babylon area. He's from that area before he moves eventually to Israel. So you have these harmful spirits, one man and one woman, and they are in Babylonian stories, but they also are in other stories as well, in both Assyrian, Canaanite, and also later we know Hebrew, because we're going to read about other types of female demons that have similarities. Lamashtu is an Assyrian demon who has wings and strangles children, I believe. You're going to find Canaanite inscriptions in Syria dating from the 7th and 8th century. These are really areas where Jews would have been living, or at least areas where Jews would have been traveling. So we have these inscriptions, we have stories about demons that have names similar to Lilith, and they have various aspects to them that are going to continue on into Judaism. Now, Lilith in Judaism is just female, and often it's female, but it is male in the Babylonian myth. I don't think it is in the Assyrian. So we have this myth of demons, this woman demon that strangles babies, has wings. We have the story of creation, in which we have two different versions in Judaism, between chapter 1 and chapter 2. And this leads to what we're going to see about Lilith. Now, Lilith, interestingly enough, is not a major character in the Talmud in terms of how often she is found there. She's only in the Talmud 4 times, and two of those references are more descriptive in terms of what she looks like as opposed to what she does. So in the Talmud, we find one passage in which it says, if an abortion had the likeness of Lilith, its mother is unclean by reason of the birth, for it is a child, but it has wings. So this is a reference in the Talmud that Lilith has wings. So we know it's some sort of demoness type character. It's got wings, according to the Talmud. In the Talmud and the tractate Shabbat, it says that men should not sleep alone in a house, lest Lilith fall upon them. So Lilith is kind of like a female succubus. It is a demon that will not only attack, we've seen babies, but here it's doing something to men. It is a siren, and it gets a little descriptive here. But what does she believe? That she is taking semen and using the semen to get herself pregnant and create demon babies. So now we see Lilith is something bad for children and something bad for men. So she is someone, according to the Talmud, that has long hair, and she has a son. So those are the 4 references in the Talmud. That's it. She's got a son, she's got long hair, men have to worry about her. It doesn't talk about the semen responsible for babies. I don't think in the Talmud, that's a later reference. And a woman, if she has an abortion, it looks like Lilith, it's bad. She's unclean. So these are still vague references. You have to understand that in the major books in the Jewish history, the Bible and the Talmud, she is very rarely mentioned. In the Bible, one time, doesn't have any connection. In the Talmud, 4 times, and what we see is none of them are good. So that's what we're talking about now. So we're going to bring it all together, and then we'll talk about her and issues in Jewish history, and then what has happened in the modern world, especially in the 1970s. So let's look at Lilith from other perspectives. She is in the Midrash. That is kind of like sermons based upon biblical books where you try and explain things that are not there. You know, the best example is we meet Abraham at 75 in the Bible. The Midrash will talk about why was Abraham chosen? What did Abraham do as a kid to be chosen? Well, Lilith is not in the Bible, so maybe the Midrash can bring out stories, which it does, about this character of Lilith. So Lilith is the first Eve who exhausts men through dreams. So invades men in dreams in the Midrash. So that's just a basic thing, because we see so much more if we combine the Midrash with other books. Because remember, there are books that are written, post-biblical books, or even books that were written at the same time as the biblical books that did not make it into the Bible. And they do talk about Lilith. So this demon that is known by probably a lot of names can be connected to other demons as well. One of them is Agrath, who has been described as a demon who had lots of kids, thousands of kids. We see that Lilith may be Lilith to us, but have a lot of other names, because in the Testament of Solomon, which is in Greek, there's another female demon called Obazoth that is related to the angel Raphael. Lilith is identified as a demon in the Dead Sea Scrolls. During the Roman times in Babylon, there are bowls, some of them Jewish, some of them not, which have formulas to exorcise demons or to protect yourself from demons, that have pictures of female demons, including women with wings and long hair. And her name is inscribed on some of these bowls. So both Jewish and non-Jewish. So other stories develop in the Midrash about who this woman is. She was the first wife, and she created demons. We'll talk about the most difficult aspect of her when we look at Judaism, but probably in the Alphabet of Ben Sura, a very widely known Midrash from the 3rd, 4th century. This is where we get the most descriptive version, because we have a lot of innuendos, things here. She's a woman, she's got hair, she's got wings, she does things to women who are pregnant, to babies, she steals semen from men. We have incantations to exorcise her, to protect us from her. But in this work, we hear about the origins a little bit. She was created with Adam, and she was unwilling to give up her equality. She wanted to be equal with Adam. She didn't want to have sex with him, so she said the name of God. She left and went with other demonic characters, and so she was pursued by angels, the angels threatened her that even though she wanted to harm newborn infants, she had to swear that if she ever saw ambulance with the 3 angels that pursued her on it, she would lose her power to kill infants. So this is the famous story. She breaks with Adam. She wants to be equal. She's not allowed to be. She leaves. She says the name of God. She starts threatening babies. 3 angels pursue her. They come to an agreement that if I'm a woman and I'm having a baby and I have an amulet with the picture of the 3 angels on it, she is not capable or able to harm my child in birth. Because remember, mortality rates at birth are continue to be an issue today in the modern world. There are still women who have miscarriages today in America, even if you have access to really good health care. So in ancient times, it was a much bigger issue, Ron.
Yeah. If Lilith, if I got you right, came before Eve, who created her?
God created her.
Why?
God, now that's a good question. So God created her, and it's almost like, from this perspective, she is the people before the flood. God made this woman. She didn't turn out to do what she was supposed to. She's wiped away, and we get a second one. Like with humanity, God didn't like humanity, wiped away humanity with the flood, and started over. So she is, now again, this is not in the Bible at all, just remember. And it's not just in Jewish literature. We see other female demons similar to her in Christianity. We talked about the Babylonian myths, the Assyrian myths, during the times of the Sassanids, which is Persia, the pre-Muslims. And so we see in Arabic demonology where she's also sometimes evil, but not always as much so. She can be less so. In the Alphabet of Ben Surah, it talks about how when she can't find other children to attack, she attacks her own children. That's how bad she is. That's one of the reasons she goes after other children, because of this. Now,
Rabbi,
yes.
just a quick question. Has there been association of Lilith with the fall, with the myth or legends of the fallen angels?
Absolutely. She is very connected in many ways to a lot of different things. Now, not always using the same name. But again, for Judaism, we don't have the fall of angels, but Christianity does. And she is a part of Christianity as well. I think often it's a different name. But remember, her primary roles are she is the strangler of children and the seducer of men. And because of these erotic powers, Jewish communities came up with incantations, traditions, customs to protect against her. One of them was, if your father dies, a son cannot go with the father to the cemetery for fear of the hovering presence of Lilith. She is also connected to other demons. She's just the most famous. Agret, Mahalath, Naama. She's awful. Naama and Lilith are also often interchangeable. And she's sometimes considered the queen of the realm of evil forces. So she's kind of like Shekhinah, which is the female essence of God, is the world of holiness, whereas Lilith is the mother of impurity, or whatever the opposite of holiness is. So she's also given other connections. Some say, do you guys remember the story of Solomon and the two harlots. You want to split the baby? The story of Solomon where two women come to him.
Yes.
Mother comes forward.
They both had a baby at the same time. One died. Both claim the other one is theirs. And one mother says, and Solomon says, I'll cut the baby in half, give one to each mother. One mother says, yes, do that. That's fine. That's fair. The other one says, no, give it to the other woman. That Lilith is the one who says, it's okay to cut the baby in half. That's Lilith in another story. Now, that's not the name given. Others think she is the Queen of Sheba, that the Queen of Sheba is, and that's found in the Targum. What the Targum is kind of a translation sort of the Bible into Aramaic. It's kind of like reading, in a time when people didn't read Hebrew as much, translating Hebrew and some of the ideas into Aramaic for the people to understand. That's the Targum. So in the Targum, they talk about her in one of the explanations that she's the Queen of Sheba, that she's actually half human, half man, and that she's trying to seduce Solomon with her allure, not only her mind. And then, of course, Christianity, she's a concubine sometimes of Satan. So we have references to her. If you talk about the Babylonian Gilgamesh epic, 19th, 18th century, from like that period, BCE, all the way to modern times in various forms and various religions. And some, she is a being that can morph into animal creatures, that she can hold on to an infant for a certain amount of time. That's one of the reasons we have the bris at 8 days, because she's got the baby for 8 days and we got to make sure the baby can survive Lilith. Karen.
I just, while you mentioned that, I don't know if anybody else experienced this. I remember my one grandmother who came from a shtetl in Poland was insistent when my first child was born that I think it was a red ribbon.
Yes.
Nodding. And it was supposed to ward off evil spirits. Was that somehow, do you think, connected to the sphere of Lilith?
Absolutely. It may not be directly to her because there are different demons, but she is definitely the most famous of the female demons. And when it comes to children, she is by far the most famous. That's the one you ward off the evil spirit. She's one of them.
No,
I'm sorry, go ahead. Who was Diana?
yes, I apologize. The connection is a bit slow.
Ask questions.
Karen, I think that's very interesting because they do that in Mexico. I'm originally from Mexico, and I thought that was only something that they did in Mexico.
Interesting.
Yes.
Well, it's funny because now that's funny that you say that. My first husband was from Mexico and he never said anything to me at the time. I remember. That's very interesting you say that. He was
Yes. And
I'm
in
sorry, go ahead.
Spanish, they call it the bad eye,
Really?
el ojo. How do you say it in Spanish?
mal de ojo.
Mal de ojo. Okay.
Yes.
And again, she's not the only demon, by the way. There's lots. The evil eye. She's often replaced by the evil eye, actually. But there's all these stories. If you hear a baby laughing to sleep, Lilith is playing with the baby. Tap them on the nose to protect them. There's various amulets, not just amulets with the 3 angels, but sometimes you have amulets with wings and hands. You have amulets with Lilith and chains. That's a very popular one, that you have her in amulets and chains. We have stories of Elijah meeting Lilith, and Elijah's going to a house to save a child, and she is there trying to kill the child, doing some terrible things, drinking the blood. and Elijah has to excommunicate her. We see her in the Kabbalah. There's various old Kabbalah scripts that have references to her, as well as there's, again, it's not only Lilith, there are other demon names, Naama, as I mentioned, Striga, but there are other demon names, and there are various incantations that we have as well. It's to ward her off. And a lot has to do with the obvious problem that women have in childbirth. Women die in childbirth, and a high percentage of kids die in childbirth or die young in ancient times. And so this is a way to try and protect your babies, although she's also there attacking men, but the baby one is really the one that really is the one she's most famous for. So if we look at some other ideas, she's also I'm trying to say in a negative way, the demon of sexuality, of women claiming that they are equal, that they deserve a place with men. And as you can see, that is one of the things that is going to be flip-flopped in the 1970s. This woman who lives in the dweller of the waste places, as we see in Isaiah, who, like Lamashtu, threatens babies, wants to eat human flesh, is also someone who is a representative of evil women, even worse than Eve. Now, Eve is the more famous. Eve is more famous. Oh, Diana, do you have a question?
Yeah, so Lilith, you could say that she's the inspiration for the succubus myths, or like the adulteress laid on what you see in a lot of movies, correct?
Sort of. I'd say more the succubus. The adulteress, I would say that's where leading a little bit more into Eve. But yeah, she's definitely got all that. So she's definitely the seductive harlot who leads men astray, definitely that as well. But Eve also does allow that. So in the Zohar, what we're bringing out, the Zohar actually speaks exactly about that. If you're going to have, you have to have certain spells, you might say, when you're having sex with your wife, because you got to make sure you're not led astray by Lilith, who may transform into the angel of death. That's from the Zohar. But she is a demon temptress, where Eve is kind of a human temptress. Eve becomes the easily deceived woman who tries to trick her husband into leaving the Garden of Eden, and is the reason that sin is brought upon humanity. So Eve is much more famous because she is a woman. She becomes the poster woman for what women have done wrong for countless ages. And there's a lot more about Eve than Lilith. I mean, Eve is, of course, everywhere. Lilith is an even worse Eve in many respects, because she's a demon. She is not a human like us. So women doing things wrong aren't as connected to Lilith as they are to Eve, because women are not demons. Lilith is, though, this demon who was a fallen angel of sorts, because she had the gall to ask for equality. She becomes the wife or the consort of Samael, who is a famous demon, and also in the alphabet of Ben Sura. And so this is what we see for Lilith for a very long time. You can even go to Jerusalem right now, and you can probably buy amulets to protect you from Lilith. And we also have to remember that the more technologically advanced a society, the more rights given to Jews, the less we concentrate on this amulet demonology perspective. Okay, modernity rises, demonology, and it goes back and forth. If you're living in America, these traditions are much less prominent, even in ultra-Orthodox sects, because there's not as much persecution. There's at least some access to health care. But when you're living in dark times, you really ask for God for help. You ask for amulets for help when you feel powerless, and you need somebody to blame for all the bad things that are happening. And Lilith is perfect for it. And so this is the Lilith character for a very long time, 3,000 years maybe, until the 1970s, probably a little earlier. And then what happens in the 1970s that changes the game? And it's amazing in only 50 years how much our perspective has changed with both Eve and Lilith. Karen.
I was thinking about the women's lib movement. Is that what you're thinking of?
Absolutely, 100%.
Okay.
We do not live in
Okay.
a vacuum.
Gloria Steinem.
Yeah, a lot of the women leading the charge were Jewish.
Yeah.
Because we're not, and it's
Betty
not,
Friedan.
yeah. And so what we see is a transformation. Now, it was beginning before the 70s, obviously. It just becomes very prominent in the 70s because of the magazine Lilith that is formed, the women's magazine. And it is decided, and I'm not as familiar with all of it, Lily Rivlin, of course, who published an article on Lilith for the magazine Miss. And that really led to the founding of the magazine Lilith in 1976. And Lilith transformed into a woman who's fighting for equality. There are three female figures who really get transformed in the 70s. Lilith, Eve, and Vashti. These are the women who were considered bad because stewards.
Yeah, it occurs to me that Lilith is really very appropriate to have been chosen in the 1970s because of her essential difference from Eve. Eve acted under the influence of someone else, the serpent. She really didn't have any thought of her own, whereas Lilith was very, very independent, and Lilith was operating by herself, for herself, as a demon. So in fact, if I were Gloria Steinem, if I were a leader of that movement, it would be Lilith that I would try to emulate, not Eve.
And that's what they did. I mean, they used both. Eve is actually vilified much more not much more, but because she's more famous. Everybody knows who Eve is. I mean, it is, you don't have to, everybody knows Eve was deceived by the snake and maybe did something wrong otherwise.
Right.
And Lilith
was celebrated.
Yeah, Lilith was the demon, but in the 70s, they turn it around completely and they say, listen, they sent her on the equality. She wanted to be equal with Adam as she should have been. Again, and Adam is not the name, but she should have been equal. That her fight for equality left her to be demonized as opposed to becoming an actual demon. And this is the article that Lily Rivkin wrote about and started going, and it began, of course, the idea that women characters have definitely been given negative roles unless they are subservient. If they're women who are doing what they're supposed to do according to men, then they're okay. Esther is fighting alongside Mordecai. Ruth and Naomi have no men. They have to do what they want to achieve their success. Flossie.
If Lilith and Adam were supposedly born around the same time and all, why wouldn't they be equal?
And that is the question, that in history, men have been put above women, really, since there's a book by Bruce Feiler who talks about it. It's an excellent book. It was, what's it called? I don't remember the name of the book. Anybody remember the name of the book? He did a really good synopsis of this. Let me look up
I'll
that book.
Google it. I'll Google it.
Let's see,
Keep
I'm there
going.
right now. Yeah.
I can Google it.
Oh my gosh, it's an excellent book. It's
I'll look it up.
it may have been Abraham. Which book? Well, anyway, I think it was Abraham that I've read, read a bunch of them. But he just talks about, or it could have been Where God Was
There's
Born.
one called The First Love Story. Is that it?
Yes, that's it. The First Love Story. Thank you.
Okay. See, you're welcome.
That's it. Excellent book where he talks about, at least at the beginning, the transformation to a male-dominated society that comes as city-nations start to be created, that the female gods, which had really been the top gods till the 4th century, start to lose their power as we go to war and we try to create nations and physical ability takes over. And this is what happens with Eve and Lilith. They are part of this ensnarement where men have lessened the role of women, and that has changed a lot in some ways. Again, obviously we know we're not where we should be in that respect, but we're definitely probably better than in other times in history. So Lilith is now in our world, modern, liberal, conservative, reform, Reconstruction Judaism, a positive character almost completely. I'd say a lot of people who have heard of Lilith in the Jewish world do not realize she was a negative character for so long, for several thousand years. That's how easy it is to change history. They think of her as this woman fighting for equality, not a demon killing babies and stealing men's semen. It is an incredible change that took a long time, but happened very quickly. Now we're still, there's still that tension there between women and men in Judaism, not as much in the liberal world, but certainly we see how this has been an incredible shift. And we can go online and really read, there's an incredible amount about Lilith, there really is. It's it's one of the few stories where you can connect it so easily to so many different time periods because of the similarity in the names. There's so many names that have Lil of demons that are women or sometimes men in ancient society, and you see these bowls, and so it's not hard to find reference to her. And so certainly by the time they're writing the Midrash and in the later biblical books, everybody knows about her, and they've seen all of these things, and you can go to, and so we talk about Lilith today, we kind of have changed it the same with Vashti. Vashti and the Purim stories, traditionally a bad guy. The king wants her to do something, she refuses to do it, and she is, because of her impertinence, she is kicked out as queen. When what really probably happened is he wanted her to dance naked in front of all of his guys, probably do other things, and when she refused, she was killed. That's probably more likely what happened. It's a farce, but she's been labeled. Now she is to some a bigger hero in the story than Esther.
Interesting.
So it's a really interesting thing to see how we've transformed Lilith into this major feminist character, probably second only to maybe Eve. Maybe Esther's higher as well, and Ruth, but really, Lilith is now. Any thoughts or questions or anything you've heard about her? Flossie, and then
All
Stuart.
I wanted to say is I never really heard about her till a few months ago, and then I brought it up to you. But the feminists evidently did their homework, that they created her, and here she is.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not just Jews who've done it, by the way, because Lilith is found in various traditions. And so in Christian groups, in Wicca groups, different types of religions, more earthy, more types, and just all different levels are trying to bring her into this new role. Stuart.
I've, two thoughts. The first one is, just a question has Lilith been associated with the Amazons?
I don't know.
your
Interesting
knowledge?
question. I don't know. That's something we can easily look up.
And the second thing is Lilith's reputation, as I see it, Lilith's reputation for the evil has not been destroyed, so to speak,
Oh, absolutely not.
in the later events. So on the one hand, she's a hero, but she's sort of bipolar. On the one hand, she's a hero, and on the other hand, she still has all of these villainous qualities, and they have not been explained in any way.
Well, what the explanation is generally that men have usurped her as the idea and used her in a way, that was, it's basically changed her reputation throughout the ages. And that's what's happened. That she was never this, from one perspective, she wanted equality. And because she spoke up, she was labeled a dissenter and derided throughout history and made to be evil. The winners get to determine how we look at somebody. And that's where she is today. And but you're right, in certain places she's not the hero, but certainly her reputation is much different in a lot of the world now than what we saw in the alphabet of than Sirah, or in even the Talmud, or in the ancient myths, or any of the other places where we find her, because she is generally this is not a Eve was the temptress, was kind of bad at best, was kind of fooled because she was a woman and she wasn't smart enough. So there is some slight endearing qualities to Eve as the mother of civilization, but none in Lilith. There's very little positive reference to Lilith before the 1970s, probably. There probably is in the 20th century in other places. But she is pure evil in a way that Eve is not. And so now we get a whole new reflection, and now there's a lot of debate and discussion about her on different levels. So it's an interesting character, and I love talking about her, and it was great. And again, what we can do now is anybody have any other people or books that we want to talk about? We talked about maybe looking at the book of Job and Proverbs next week, which is really the most important. Yes, Flossie.
Could we ever talk about Jewish books going back years until today that you feel are worthwhile books to read?
That's a great idea. We've done that before, and I think we could definitely do it again. What are some great Jewish books? Do we want to do that next week, or do we want to stay on the Hebrew Bible?
I would stay on the Bible, I think.
Well,
I don't know other people. Yeah.
I
That's
just
how
chose Job and Proverbs
I-
because it's a very interesting.
I would like to do Job. I don't know about anybody
And
else.
we'll do mostly Job, but we'll bring in Proverbs because Proverbs brings the tension to Job that is essential for the future
Okay.
of Judaism. And so we'll do that next week. And then we'll continue to look at some other biblical. Again, Lilith is really amazing because she's one reference to her in Isaiah that has very little to do with anything. And so, and yet she becomes this major character. Ron.
Yeah, I found this session very interesting. I didn't know anything about Lilith before this, but it seems to me, from what I gathered, is that any person or woman that does something wrong, she can always say, Lilith made me do it.
Yeah, and that is an excellent point, Ron. And Lilith isn't always the demon for that. She's more the demon in certain perspectives, but you're right. Demonology has a lot to do with lack of power or blame, both cases. Something is wrong here. I have to blame a demon. I am powerless. I need somebody to save me. I need the Messiah to save me. So you're right. I think more than anything, Ron, you're exactly on point that these ideas are used as excuses or more inflammatory ways, as ways to insult, or as ways to abuse. Diana. Oh,
Yes. So I actually wanted to share something. And has anyone seen the show on Netflix, Lucifer?
I
Yes,
saw an
it was a
episode.
very interesting
Yes.
series.
It's really
Actually,
good.
my aunt, aunt in Mexico, and Mexico is a very Catholic country. Even if you're not religiously an observant Catholic, there's still very much the Catholic culture. And so she told me this one time, and she said, Diana, don't tell anyone because this could be considered blasphemy. But especially now with the cartels in Mexico, and not to get political, but there's the concept, a lot of them, that there are people possessed by demons. And she said that her perspective is that there's not really a hell in the traditional sense, but rather we make our own hell in the sense that everything that's going on, particularly in Mexico, which applies directly to her. And that is something that I've also heard in the show, that people think it's a lot easier to blame, oh, the devil made me do it. Lilith made me ruin a marriage, for example, instead of taking responsibility.
Yeah, and I think we still do that today. We use scapegoats, we use excuses. The demonology is not as prevalent with us in the modern, but it's still used, So again, excusing our behavior is a tradition that probably goes back to the very beginning of humanity. I'm not sure, but probably. But Lilith is exactly that. Eve is, I think, even more so in some ways as well. But a lot of Lilith was the worry about miscarriages. That was a big. So it's not, in some ways it is, how do we stop miscarriages from happening? But she's also the enticer of men. When men are doing something wrong, she is enticing them, or she is using us to create new demons that'll create more havoc. So all good stuff. Yay, we love demons.
For
Stuart.
the future, if I might, I'd like to suggest Wisdom of the Fathers.
Oh, you mean Pirkei Avot? We definitely could do
Pirkei
that.
Avot, yeah. So
All right.
I don't know whether you feel that fits into this or that requires some
Absolutely.
separation, but it seems to me that that's really,
Yeah, it's not biblical, but it's Talmudic, so we can definitely do that.
That's a
So we'll
separate
do a
whole.
couple. I'm sorry, Karen?
No, I was just thinking that's a good one, but a whole separate kind of theme, isn't it?
Yeah, we're gonna do Bible now.
okay.
That could be something we do next.
Care vote.
And I'd like to, after the end, Rabbi, I'd like to speak to you, stay on with you for a moment or two to discuss yesterday's email.
Okay.
Yesterday's email.
Notes
Email,
down.
but that was between us,
Okay.
between Rabbi and me. You can
Oh,
handle it.
All right. And then next week we're gonna do Job and a little bit of Proverbs.
Proverbs.
Excellent. Thanks, guys. Absolutely terrific. As for what's coming up, new member Shabbat on Saturday. If you have the ability to get here Sunday, it will be really interesting as Jason Friedman is going to talk about his acclaimed book, Liberty Street, about one of the families in our congregation during the Civil War. It's supposed to be an excellent book. I'm not going to start. I got to start reading.
Yeah, I'm about halfway through it.
And
yeah, it's
he will be here, and it's free of charge, and we'll also be recording it. It will not be live, but people want to watch it later. So that should be, and then if you're available, obviously, the week after is Rachel Kolbrenner's bat mitzvah. That's going to be a big deal. It'll be the first, clergy bar bat mitzvah here. I don't know if it may be ever, but certainly in a very long time. And that'll be on Saturday, and everybody's welcome to lunch. And then Friday night, I know on the 7th, we're going to have a Rockin' Shabbat with our band, and then Cantor and Abigail and their family are going to help lead the Rockin' Shabbat. So that'll be really amazing. Is there any other announcements before we conclude? All right.
Rabbi,
Flossie.
I just want to say today's the day the young man I told you about is went into the service.
I wish him well. We
So
said
thank you for your prayer. Thank you.
Of course. A friend of hers' son is going, just enlisted into the Israeli military, to the IDF. Not enlisted, re-enlisted. So all our best, everybody. Our prayers to everybody, and have a wonderful, wonderful week, and look forward to seeing you. And next
Thank you,
week,
Rabbi.
we're going to talk about happy things.
Thank you.
Book of
Rabbi, it
Job.
seems that when you talk about one person, it's extremely interesting.
Yeah, it can be. And
Yeah.
And again, it's hard. You can do, all of these subjects we do for 45 minutes or an hour could be, courses in college for semesters or long. So next week we'll do Job, and we'll look at it from my perspective. There are other perspectives, but the one I study, which I still like best, and we'll look at Job and Proverbs. All right, everyone, be safe. Hopefully we'll see you Shabbat.
Take care, everybody.
Safe, everybody. Thanks for joining us on the.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Loves to say, on the class that shall not be named.